Gloria DeGaetano is an internationally and nationally acclaimed educator, author, and speaker who has over 30 years of experience with working with children, teachers, and parents as a classroom teacher, reading specialist, district administrator, university instructor, speaker, and consultant. Ms. DeGaetano is a best-selling author and has written Screen Smarts, A Family Guide to Media Literacy, another Stop Teaching Our Kids to Kill, a call of action against TV, movie, and video game violence with Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman, and manuals for educators and child advocates, including Television and the Lives of Our Children and the Media Smart series for students K through 5. Her latest book, Parenting Well in a Media Age, which we have available out on our table, has won the 2007 iParenting Media Award for Excellence. Ms. DeGaetano's books and articles have been translated into Spanish, German, Danish, Romanian, Korean, and Turkish. A respected voice for children and parents, Ms. DeGaetano's ideas and articles have appeared in numerous publications, including McCall's Magazine, Parenting Insights, American Baby Magazine, the Boston Globe, Committee for Children newsletter, the American Academy of Pediatrics newsletter, and Catholic Faith and Family magazine. Gloria is an innovative industry leader and has appeared on the Today Show to discuss baby Einstein videos and has been interviewed on many national radio shows, including NPR's Fresh Air, The Marketplace, and the Tavis Smiley Show. The Parenting Coach Institute, which she heads, has been featured on news programs by NBC affiliates throughout the country and in newspapers and magazines, including Newsweek, Parents Magazine, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. So I would like for you all to help me welcome Ms. Gloria DeGaetano.
Thank you, Laura. That was very kind of you. And what I learned from my two sons. And that's the important thing, isn't it, as a mother? And they are now well-functioning adults, I'm happy to say. And it does happen, but it's a process. And so today I'd like to talk a little bit about that process with a focus on the middle school years and the teen years. Tomorrow I'm talking with a focus on the elementary years, and then the next day with a focus on the preschool years. But I'm just curious how many of you are here as parents of kids about ages 11 to 14. Okay, quite a few. And maybe let's look at 15 to 18. Okay, some of you are here saying hands up, okay. And what about younger than 7 through 10? All right, okay. So I'll try to adjust and mention some of the research for the younger ages. And if you have specific questions, we are going to stop at 3 for the questions. Do you think we should have questions as I go, or do you want me to just do everything? Questions as we go. I'm so used to this as a teacher, I'm much more comfortable doing a workshop, and so a half-a-day workshop is my preferred mode, and so to get everything in 2 hours is sometimes difficult. But I have been working on issues of the media actually since 1987. I left my work as a school district administrator in order to do the work I'm doing right now. And of course the screens have changed, obviously. We are in a tsunami of technology. However, parenting issues haven't, and the human brain development hasn't changed, and what kids and parents really can focus on to support wise use of screen technology hasn't changed. That's what I want to focus on, and what you are doing, hopefully you will find 3 things from this talk: a lot of affirmation for what you're already doing, and some encouragement and enthusiasm to stay the course, some reasons from brain science to bolster you in those very difficult times when it is hard. It is an unprecedented challenge to parent well in this digital world. The other thing I'd like to do is create a framework for you with a specific kinds of concepts, a conceptual framework that will then look at working strategies within that framework. Some of those strategies may work for your family, some may not, some you may already be doing. But hopefully you walk away with a few new ideas and this conceptual framework that I've developed over the years, basically over the decades, in the research. Because I've got to synthesize 20 years of research in 2 hours. So that's what I want to do, and I will do it. If we could look in this crystal ball, right, and know what this future is for our children, what would we imagine? Can we imagine this future? Google sure can. And now virtual reality with the new, buyout of Oculus, virtual reality is around the door, around the corner. We're opening the door to it. And what Google's plans are to have a Facebook type of interface where now we share our experiences through virtual reality and not just through posting our photos. In our future for our kids, what do we want? Do we want technology to take over? Do we want Google and all of the high-tech companies to dictate what it is that we are? What it is to be human? I don't think so. I also know that we can stay human in a technological age, but it is going to require more of us than we thought. It's going to require more intentionality, more consciousness, more mindfulness, more vigilance, and more articulation to our children from little on up what it means to be human. When our youngsters start having their robot friends and talking with their robots every day and telling their robots what to do, there are many experts now worried about a master-slave relationship going to emerge right from the age of 3 while the 3-year-old is giving the robot directions. We have increased complexity if we look in this crystal ball, increased uncertainty. What I have studied in this combining of media and digital literacy over the last 2 decades is something called living systems theories. And maybe you're familiar with them. Living systems theories emerged out of biology. Systems thinking is very, very prominent in high-level problem solving. We always want to think about how systems interact. I'm real interested in how living systems interact and what are the principles behind living systems, because human beings are living systems. And we need to stay living systems in this age of digital devices, in this age of the machine, in a new age of the machine. So I guess my bottom line is to take a look at how we can keep our kids human, how we can teach them. Of course, we want them to be able to use technology as entertainment and as tools for education. We don't want them to be addicted, to be tethered to those screens. And how do we avoid that? And there are some fundamental principles and ideas that you are probably implementing, but I'm going to affirm you and show you in science that, hey, we've got to be doing this, not only for ourselves, but for everybody. The parenting decisions you make each and every day transforms our society. And I don't know if you think about that so much on a time you're tired and overwhelmed and so fed up. You don't want to say no another time. You're being nagged to death, and you just can't take it anymore. But as you are vigilant, as you are courageous, as you stand for what you believe in, as you work with your kids to teach them well to use technology as tools, you are transforming society. And our society needs our kids to be as wise as they are smart about screen technologies. Our society needs that desperately. So I commend you for being here, and I thank you so much for your time. I know that you're really busy and that there's always a lot of options. And so please know how much I really am honored that you are here. If we look at this quote by, let's see if I can work this, by Jaron Lanier, this is the bottom line, right? The most important thing about a new technology is how it changes people. Does anybody know about Lanier's work? Do you know who he is? Anyone? You might want to look him up. He's a really interesting guy. He began Second Life, or Second Self, virtual reality. He's one of the foremost beginning people that created virtual reality, worked on high-tech companies, works now as a consultant for Microsoft. He's also a very, very talented musician, a collector of ancient and different types of instruments. I think mostly medieval instruments. I'm not sure. If you're a musician, I think you would really enjoy his work in that area. He's a Renaissance man, really. So he has the best of both worlds, the art, the right brain, right? And the left brain, the technology. He has been writing about technology in interesting ways. This book, You Are Not a Gadget, was written in 2010. He's written a book last year called Who Owns the Future, in which he's talking about how Facebook and Google and various larger corporations are taking over the internet. If you go to his website, jaredlanier.com, you'll see a website that looks like a child did it. Actually, our children could do better. You know, it's done intentionally in a very primitive way, so that we can think about what is it that we're doing here. Oh, everybody has to go on WordPress. Everybody has to do this, and I'm there. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I love it for many reasons. But he's saying we've got to remember why we're doing it and what is it about. He also is proposing in his new book, Who Owns the Future, a new way of using the internet. So if you read it, stay in touch with me. Let me know what you think. But his work is seminal. And if I were teaching high school again, I started out as a high school teacher and junior high teacher, so I really enjoy those minds. I would use part of his books in an English class, in a social studies class, and get our kids thinking. If I had teenagers, they would have to read his book. They would have to read my books too. Especially Stop Teaching Our Kids to Kill, which is not about teaching kids to kill, it's about video game technology. And it's never one thing. It's never one thing, okay? It's always a bunch of things, and we can call them risk factors and protective factors. And what we want to do is amp up as many protective factors as we can and reduce the risk factors. So if we take a look at here, I don't know if this was a real photo or if it was photoshopped. Were people then taking pictures like this? But if it is real, it's interesting in that, do we use whatever it is as an excuse not to connect? Is it new that we put our heads in our phones? Or is it something in human nature that says, sometimes we might need a time out from the person next to us? have the digital devices come into the door from your kids, a lot of times parents say, here, put them in the basket. And leave your cell phone in the basket while we have dinner together, while you're going to do your homework. We're going to put them aside here. I don't know if any of you use that technique. It has helped. And it helps kids not text at the dinner table. It's a family rule in many households of parents that I work with. But what I want to explain about these two baskets is that one basket has negatives in it. All of the problems, all of the potential problems. The other basket has positives in it. What we appreciate about social media and connecting, and there's so many good things. And so it's life. Life is always both. You sitting here today, you have many blessings. You can count your blessings, and also we would be amazed at what people are dealing with here in this room. What are the problems? What are the worries? What are the challenges? Where do we put our focus? There's a tenet in brain science, maybe you've heard of it. What you focus on grows. And this is absolutely true. What we put our attention on will grow. So do we put our attention on what is wrong, what is going, and the worry, the anxiety is there, or do we put our attention on what we appreciate about screen technologies and what we appreciate about our kids, their talents, their abilities, their curiosities? What are their strengths? Or do we focus on what their weaknesses are? Do we focus on our own weaknesses, our own guilt, our own displeasures? Or do we focus on our strengths, what we have as parents, what you've learned over the years of parenting, your strengths, your unique qualities? In creating the Parent Coaching Institute in 2000 and now Parent Coach International, it's grown, and actually my work has also been translated into Chinese. I've been spending 3 years in China working because they have a lot of problems with internet addiction, as you probably know, and also South Korea I've worked in, and my work has been translated into Korean too. Part of what I think is a huge issue here is that our tendency as human beings is to always focus on the negative when we're under stress, and to forget about our challenges. To forget about our strengths in order to tackle those challenges. We forget about that. And that's why I started the coaching aspect, because in coaching you're always going for growth and optimal development, and supporting people who are under stress, who aren't remembering their strengths. So one idea that may be helpful is having two baskets in the home. One of the challenges that you're all dealing with, the contentions, the conflicts, and write on slips of paper and put them in that basket, and spend a week or two doing that. Have the kids do it. In the other basket, what are you appreciating? What is working well in our family around screen technology? What are your strengths? What are you doing right? What's mom doing right here in screen technology? What is good? And by doing that, we have now reality. Now we can talk about reality, because reality is always both. And one of my frustrations is that when I talk about the negative aspects of screen technology, then it's like, oh, but we could do this, and we could do this, and we could have media literacy. Yes, 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 yes. When I'm talking about the problems with screen technology, doesn't mean I'm forgetting about the good things. I know. So I want to have those two baskets here as we talk, so that when we are talking about the challenges, we can address address the challenges by dipping into the basket of the good. What is working? This is a process we use in our coaching. It comes out of a lot of research on positive psychology. The science of positive psychology, I'm sure you've been reading about it, and appreciative inquiry. And in this science, we know that we can use our strengths more intentionally to tackle our challenges when we're aware of our strengths. So, taking some time for your own reflection about your strengths as a parent, what you appreciate about yourself, putting those in that basket and letting your kids read it. What you appreciate about your kids, what are their talents, what are their strengths? And then if there are contentious issues around media, digital devices, having that list in that basket. And I'll tell you what we're going to do with it in a little bit. Because if you do decide to have a written agreement with your teen, or an elementary age child you could also, you can begin at this place. If you already have a written agreement around social media, digital devices, fabulous, and we can talk about what's been working for you. And maybe you can help other parents with that. But having a written agreement is really a very powerful tool. It's not that you're giving in or caving into your kids, not at all. And we'll go through this process of clarity here. But if you do decide to do the two baskets, it's a great way to show reality. There are 4 aspects to reality that I want to talk about. And one of them I talk a lot about in my book, and that's the industry-generated culture, the industry reality. I guess we're going to we'll start with your reality, and then we'll do the industry. Because your reality is the most important. You want the best for your kids. You are under a lot of pressures, obviously. This culture is unprecedented in terms of how vigilant parents have to be. We have our own time constraints, and we have our own priorities. In other words, we have stress. We have a lot of stress in our lives. And our reality is very different from the other 3 realities I want to talk about. It's exhausting to be a parent in this digital age. The industry culture, and in my book I outline 6 challenges, and here we'll just look at a few. You obviously are working toward protecting your kids from inappropriate media images. So you've got the proliferation of media images, what to say, which ones are okay, how to determine which ones are okay, what's your criteria, how to set the boundaries. It's very, very difficult to set boundaries. Everything is out there. We have oversaturation. Everyone, you have the peer pressure, perhaps pressure among adults, because everybody has an iPad, everybody has a cell phone or a smartphone. The industry culture wants to make sure that you get the next one, the next version, that your kid's not left behind. Yes, they're digital natives. Yes, they need to know how to navigate this culture. But you know what? I guess one thing I thought of, well, I was a dial phone native. You know, I was a dial phone native. Before, it was the operator. You picked up the phone and the operator was on it. Hello? How can I help you? I'd like to place a call to 339-5472. Okay, 1 minute, please. I grew up with a dial phone. You could dial it yourself. But nobody was calling me a dial phone native. Were our ancestors saying to their kids, well, he's a fire native. He grew up, he knows how to rub those stones together. It's natural. He's a fire native. Where did it come Well, no. When we see a 5-year-old be able to play the video games and do all this, they can do it. It's in their environment. Yes, they can do it. But that doesn't mean they don't need you, and that doesn't mean they're smarter than you. That doesn't mean you can't learn it. So what do we have? We have two things going on here where, oh, they're digital natives, okay. And in a way then, it disses parents. It says, oh, parents, you're not important anymore. But that's what the industry culture wants. That's what they want. They are selling directly to kids in a way that they never did 10 years ago. And now 5-year-olds. So we don't want to become peripheral parents on the sidelines while our kids are playing football with the industry culture. And we have to, wait, no, intercept, catch that ball. Does it feel like that sometimes? It's intentional. How do we get back our personal sense of agency as parents, our own authentic authority? Because we have a right to that authentic authority and respecting our kids' understanding of technology and their innate ability to learn it. I'm not saying no to that. Both and. I'm saying that, hey, this is powerful. We have more influence than the industry culture if we take it seriously. We can't give in. And why do I call it an industry culture? Well, when industries were proliferating, let's say at the turn of the 20th century, like you might have had, okay, say, the railroad. All right. So the railroad influenced us. The automobile influenced us. Did it change our attitudes? Yes, it did. Did these industries come into the home and have a direct relationship with our children each and every day? In some way, they did, but not in the way mass media does. Mass media is a very interesting, a very different kind of industry. And mass media and the technology that delivers mass media are specific to creating intimate relationships with our children without us if we let it. So do we want to be creating a culture that is pushed forward by an industry? And one definition of culture is a signifying system. A culture tells people what is important, what's not important, what's meaningful. And are our kids learning more about what's meaningful from the industry culture, mass media and its delivery systems of technology, or are they still learning it from us? I think they're still learning it from us. However, a lot of kids aren't learning it. A lot of kids think violence is cool because they see it on the screen. 1 out of 11 teens are addicted to violent video games. So, as a society, we are losing ground in terms of adult influence. Can we make reality of life as interesting as a game, an app? That's a huge challenge. There have been studies you can learn algebra in 42 minutes on a video game. So it's quick. And life is slow. And interacting with processes that require mental challenge are slow, which we'll talk about. How do we make life as attractive as a two-dimensional screen immersion is a challenge of our times. But I think we do when we connect with our kids and show them how vital and exciting life is outside of the screen, which we have to do now more intentionally, because the industry culture is more intentional. The other part of it is the kids' reality. And their reality is that the industry culture is supporting their need to feel belonging to their peer group. Never before has a culture able to influence a peer group in a mass way as before. So the industry says, you know, this is what you do if you're a teenager. Here are the things that are important to be a teenager. It isn't the tribe anymore doing that. It isn't our families. We can't do it on a mass scale. We can only do it in our own families. But the mass scale influences in a mass way, creating challenges for peer group pressure. So how do we address peer group pressure when we know what we want for our kids and it's against what the peers are doing, but yet the kids have a need and a vital need, a developmental need to belong to their peer group and to feel that belonging. Entertainment obviously is easier than the studying, and some kids have a problem if their habits of mind aren't developed beforehand. Then it's much more likely that they would be at risk for wanting screens as tethers. The teens' reality, though, is that they're at home with technology, and this is a good thing. In the long run, it's a great thing, because technology obviously is going to advance, and we want them to be as facile and as knowledgeable as they can be. The point that our entry point is to use screen technology as educational tools and to teach them intentionally how to do that. And within this frame, I'll give you, hopefully, it'll be a helpful frame for that. The last reality is the brain science, which the brain science is showing many things, and all of you are possibly familiar with the new brain development and the brain science. If we had to boil it down into three things that the teen years needs, it's a sense of autonomy, a knowledge of their competence, and their ability to relate well with others. This comes from decades of research by researchers named D.C. and Ryan, Edward D.C. and Richard Ryan. Richard Ryan actually wrote a book several years ago on video games and self-identity. You may want to pursue his work, but they are well known, Edward D.C., D.E.C.I., and Richard Ryan, for intrinsic motivation and for what kids need to develop self-actualization and a sense of autonomy, a sense of their own competence, a knowledge of who they are and what their talents and skills are. This is where the focus on strengths comes in. And their ability to relate well with others, which social media may be impacting or social media can be helping, depending on how we use it. I'd like to think of ways, and we'll talk about this as we get into more practical aspects, how social media can actually help socialize our kids, because it can. It can be used as a tool and a learning opportunity, a teachable moment, so to speak. Now, the last reality, this brain science, there's many different things, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the hormonal changes in the teen years, some of the cognitive changes, the differences between the early teens and the older teens. But for now, this is the bottom line. This is what we want to have accomplished by age 18 or so. And hopefully, when we look at the interaction, I guess I'm having a problem using this. I need to go back. Yeah, I just need to go back, and I'm going forward. Okay, that's where I am. Then we'll go forward. Thank you so much. So the parenting identity, if you read my book or plan to, I have a chapter about parenting identity, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Your parenting identity is in the middle, and I define that as your values, your priorities, what you want for your kids. What's important for you? What's your bottom line? That is the controlling factor here. Now you see you have your child's reality and the parent's reality juxtaposed. and the industry culture juxtaposed to the brain science. Part of an incredible frustration I have is that the 1990s were considered the decade of the brain. But mass media does not get the brain science out to the parents. It's not there. It doesn't help the parents. Why? Because if parents knew the brain science, the industry culture would be suffering. It would be suffering. Because there would be some radical shifts in how we parent kids. And I mean mostly in the early years. The brain of the child has not changed. What the child's brain needs has not changed. And what it needs is a way to live in this reality. It needs three-dimensional reality and three-dimensional experiences. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But you can't, our national average is 6 to 8 hours a day on screen technologies outside of school. And people who come to my, you're amazed because you wouldn't allow it, and you're here. But that's where the future is going. That's where most kids are. There aren't the boundaries being put there, and they don't know reality outside screen reality. And now the median age for starting kids on screens is 9 months of age, which is completely opposite. So when I was, for instance, talking about baby Einstein, at the time the research hadn't come out to say it's not right. But I had to stay in my integrity, my identity, and say, you know what? These baby Einstein videos aren't helping babies. And I said it on the Today Show with a professor who was actually, and I Googled her and found out she was under contract by Sesame Street that had just started Better Beginnings videos for babies. And she helped create that. So I knew what I was getting into, kind of. I was just getting into a polarization. We weren't going to go into any facts. So I said to them, this was the last thing I was able to say, why is it that only 6% of American families, American parents, know that the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no videos for children from birth through age 2? Why is it? It's because shows like that and people like that and the mass media keep pushing disinformation or at least confusion. Oh, the American Academy of Pediatrics says this. So what? Who's listening to them? I think sometimes I want to create an opera. And in the opera, the American Academy of Pediatrics and all the experts would be singing the same refrain. No, keep it to 2 to 3 hours a day, keep it to 2 to 3 hours a day. And then the media would be saying, oh, it's okay, get the new cell phone, get the new iPhone, here's the new app, blah, blah, blah. So the parents in the middle of this, how can we survive it? How can we change it? It's in places like this where you have a strong community, where you know your friends, where you're making the decisions based on your love for your children. These are the important things that are critical to growing what I call in my book a personal generated culture, a personal generated culture. And we can be doing it. I mean, one of my colleagues, her 14-year-old daughter, writes a blog for her brother's sports team. And she likes to write, and she's good at it. She's 14, and she's writing a blog. She started another one on book reviews for kids her age. Fabulous. She's using her identity, her talents, and the screen technology in a way that she's in control of. And the screen technology is not in control of her. These are examples that I'm sure you can give many of them. And part of what I think is critically important here is for you to realize that your choices every day are creating the interface between all these four realities. And there's nothing wrong with talking to our kids about, hey, they want to make money off of you. When I told my kids, that Nike, it was basically the whole logo thing. And it was before the logo, no logo book came out or anything, but I was talking to them about, why do you want to wear these logos? How much is Nike paying you? What do you mean, Mom? Well, I give my agent for my book 15%. You should at least be getting 15% from Nike. No. That was really an interesting thing for them to think about. So what happened was, they just wanted to buy then, it was hard, you couldn't find shirts with no logos on, but that's what they did for a while. And they started a little movement in their high school on that. They didn't want to be used. Teens don't want to be used, but sometimes they're not thinking about it. We're so immersed in the industry culture, we're like goldfish swimming in it. We don't see often how it is. And obviously, the goal is, can we do the next one? Thank you. The goal is this interaction between them and creating relevant information with all these four realities intermingling. The four realities are never separate. The kids don't know where their want comes from. They don't know that they're being influenced unconsciously by mass media. They don't know that. And yet 85% of our brain is unconscious processing, even for adults. It's all under the tip is so small and everything else is under. So why we do certain things, what are the motives? A lot of it is unconscious, especially in the young people's minds. And we, as parents, can bring it to consciousness. So let's take a look at the pieces of relevant information, and the framework that I have is the relevant information that I think is most relevant for you right now, based on my years of research, and then the working knowledge from that relevant information that could provide a plan for you. The third is the inner wisdom which you have, and tapping your wisdom, your gut level, and knowing and being courageous enough to live from that gut level. I've never regretted living from my integrity or saying something that I honestly felt needed to be said, even though I was only on the Today Show for a few minutes and never asked out and never asked back. And that's how it is. So we do our small work. We're not well known. You do the work. You just do the humble work with the people, and you live from what is important for you. How great is that? So the guidelines we talked about, I don't need to spend a lot of time, but let's go. So the first piece of relevant information is the guidelines. Okay, the next one. So the 3 to 4 hours a day for kids over 11 or 12 is a recommended guideline from the American Academy of Pediatrics. And this is in addition to all of the school work, so they might be doing other things on the screens for research. I think this is high in my opinion. Okay, this is high for me, but in the digital age, maybe it isn't, when the average is 6 hours. 8.5 if you count the multitasking they're doing, as I said, in addition to the 8 hours they spend in school. So obviously these kids aren't doing much else. They're not learning a musical instrument. They're not playing in the Wizard of Oz. They're tethered to the screen. And interestingly enough, those kids will be the kids who won't be able to use screen technology wisely. They aren't going to be the innovators, the people who will find different ways, like Jared Lanier is advocating, the way to live with virtual reality and stay human. Those kids are just going to be addicted to screen technology as it is. Or they'll be more likely, I shouldn't say. But the longer, 8 hours a day is way too much in addition to. So I think 3 or 4 hours, I like to think of a weekly budget. And if you are giving a weekly budget of time, and let's look at screens also. What do we mean by screens? It used to be that we meant television, right? Then it used to be we meant television video. Then it used to mean, okay, well, how much time they're downloading on the computer. Now it means they're digital, how much time they're actually on the digital device. How much time are they watching a movie or a television program, sort of a passive, taking in, enjoying, having fun, using it as a toy? How much time a week should teens be doing that? 5 to 7 hours? 7 to 10 hours a week? We like, I'm so glad Continuum is back. Does anybody know about that show? Continuum? I think it would be great for teens. It's almost like a video game. It's a Canadian science fiction series. Like House of Cards is here, or Games of Thrones. Continuum is seen here, and we stumbled upon the first episodes. And it's a futuristic back and forth in time, and all this stuff is going on, and it has a feminine hero. It's great science fiction, I think, and a lot of adventure. But now the next one is on, and of course my husband is taping it for me while I'm here. So we have our favorites, and we want to use television as a way to enjoy and also then talk. And one of the activities that I have up on your website for the parent group is the 100 Family Media Literacy Activities, which gives you ways to talk about these programs and ways that kids can enjoy, do activities around talking. I used to mute the commercials and ask my kids, how would you want to end this? Pretty soon it's going to end. What would you do? How would you write a different ending? And this was something a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old can all talk about, and they can all have a different idea. Anything is possible. The attitude I wanted to have with my sons was, hey, you know what? You're smarter than anything you see on TV, or you're just as smart, but possibly smarter. And you could write that. You could write that script. And I bet you could write that. So it's no coincidence that both sons are getting PhDs, and one was asked by an editor to write an article for Atlantic Monthly. I mean, it does fit in with what we do, right, in the home. So we want to show that, hey, you're smart. You're smarter than anything. This is the Wizard of Oz in some ways. There's nothing behind that curtain but another human being that's using their creativity, something that you also have. And they don't know it. They're not thinking about that, especially under the age of 15. They're not thinking. They're putting these other people up as ways, oh, they're so great, they're so cool, they're so good. Hey, you write your blog. You could have influence too. You could do this with multimedia, create videos. Now it's so easy. When I started this work with media literacy, it wasn't. In the 80s, or early 90s, it wasn't so easy. But teens were putting out PSA announcements for no drinking and driving between Christmas and New Year's when there was a lot of need for it. And one of the English teachers did a project like that. So many different projects could be done in English and social studies, combining media literacy. So if your school doesn't have a media literacy curriculum, it's another way to engage that power of the kids. So the media. The other part is, the watching of the TV. Then I like to think of 2 types of interaction with media. One is the interactive apps, playing games, the interactive video games. That's kind of fun, another toy. And then the interactive social media, talking with my friends, connecting, telling them what we're going to be doing, gathering for a discussion. 3 different ways screens are being used. Entertainment, movies, videos, television programs, documentaries. How many kids are watching documentaries? You can keep a list of the documentaries that you're watching as a family, track them, and say, once a month, we're going to watch a documentary as a family. The second was interactive with apps, interactive with video games. third is interactive with social media. So you have these 3 ways they're using the screens. And I think it can be helpful to think about those 3 ways. What's your bottom line in terms of how much time they're on these different screens? So 7 to 10 hours a week watching movies and television programs, or 10 to 12 hours a week doing that. If they're doing their homework and their habits of mind are good and they have other talents they're using, that's reasonable for a teenager. Maybe not 11 or 12, maybe it'd be 7 hours, 5 to 7. How much time playing these games? I know that Minecraft is creative. It's fabulous. But it's on a screen. And there are ways. One of the parents I worked with, actually in Brazil, she had a great idea. Her kids are on Minecraft. This is a whole worldwide problem. You know, her kids were on Minecraft so much, and what she decided was they had to get off. She set the time, and then they created little dolls. They had to make dolls instead of the Legos on 2-dimensional screen. They had to make dolls of the characters that they were playing with Minecraft and do it in 3-dimensional reality and play and feel and touch. They're only 7 and 9 years old, and they still need that kind of experience. So playing the games and the apps need you to create a rule and a boundary. Playing the interactive with the social media, how much time they also, and even if your son or daughter is 16 or 17, they're in your home, they need the boundary. We'll talk about having the contract, ways to create a contract with your kids that you can do this in a way that you're listening to them, but you're also putting your foot down too. You don't give up your authentic authority, and you can listen to them at the same time. It's a both-and world. But the recommendation by experts, we just saw this, is 3 to 4 hours a day, and then have a few family rules and strive for consistency. So I just gave you some examples of rules, thinking about the 3 different big categories of screens in your kids' lives. Because not all screens are created equal. And some kids may have more of a challenge getting off social media than watching TV. Some girls may need to have social media as an outlet when they get stressed. They might be using it as an outlet. If we understand that, maybe we'll be a little more lenient. Some boys may need the video game after all of the stress of the debate club, and they're using it to unwind. Okay. It's always a system, and there's always several elements to take into consideration. We don't want to have, it's not just black and white. It's so hard today because you want to have a direction for the rules, but you've got to look at the unique characteristics of your son or daughter, what they're capable of, what they've accomplished, how much you trust them, how they earned your trust, how you dialogue with them. And the most important thing, the first tenet in our institute is relationships are primary. It doesn't matter how many activities or parenting strategies you have if the relationship with your child isn't a strong bond, isn't open communication, isn't trusting. The relationship is primary. So I always say, okay, as we're working on these recommendations by the experts, as we're working on rules, we work on the relationship too. We work on having fun together. We work on time together. We work on communication together in order to bring and enhance the aliveness around media and digital devices so that it isn't always the contentious problem. Let's look at this the next slide. And with teens, this research is showing that teens who have less screen time, and let's just bring it all in at this point, this might give you a little impetus for setting those boundaries. You know, do get better grades in school, use screen technology as educational tools, learn to stay in control of their own devices, and basically balance their lives. They're less likely to become addicted. With parents in control and setting the boundaries and the rules according to the experts, we have happy outlook and happy outcomes. The kids enjoy the screen technology so much more, and they start being in control of it themselves. Because we're modeling, when we set the boundary, we're modeling our priority, what's important to us. One tenet in parent education, you probably heard this, is when you say no, you're really saying yes to other things. You're saying yes to what you believe in. Okay, let's look at this next slide. And benefits of less screen time, and we'll just put these all in. When we talk about family time, we can talk about family time with screens and family time without screens. And if you haven't made those distinctions with your kids, that could be a really interesting thing. You know, like tonight we are going to all look at this blog together and talk about it. There's so many political blogs, there's so many artistic organizations, there's an abundance of rich universe out there on the internet that can be dialogue with youth and with teens that, hey, we can talk about it. We're going to use screen time now as a family, and we're going to use screen as an impetus. I just ran across this article on kids and robots, and I did. April 3rd, in Forbes magazine, kids talking to robots. If I had a 15-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old, I would read that article with them. I would read it aloud to them. I'd read it on the screen with them. I would talk with them about, what do you think? Because they were talking about mostly young children, but then there was an example of a 17-year-old and how he talked to a robot. And some of the issues that are coming up are that, you know, we get mad. The kids get mad at the robot. First, they like talking to Siri, and they enjoy it. Then they start yelling at Siri, and they get mad at Siri. And some of the researchers, this guy at the University of Washington is saying the reason they get mad is because they are expecting an emotional response from Siri. And Siri isn't giving them that emotional response, and even at 17 years old, they get mad. My first conversation with Siri, I got mad at her too, or it. What I wanted to do, I was trying to trick her though, because a friend of mine was running in the woods, and she had a bear following her, and she didn't know what to do. She didn't remember if she should stop, look at it, or keep running. I go, no, don't keep running. But I said, did you have your cell phone? You could have asked Siri. So let's ask Siri. Siri, what do you do when you're running in the woods and a bear is following you? What do you do? Must look that up on Google. No, tell me what you do. Must look that. You're not answering my question. I do not understand. You do not understand my question. So I went into this long thing, and then finally I said something, and she retorted back. It was kind of snide. You know, it was like, I don't think you're getting the emotional component of this, I said. I do not. I don't think you are either. So she said that. I was like, we were getting in an argument. I was getting in an argument with the robot. So when I read this article on Forbes, I thought, I wonder if they took into consideration that adults also get mad at Siri because we're not getting the information that we want because the robot can't read our contextual cues like human beings can, which is amazingly complex, even only in language, you know, in words over the phone or through a conversation, even texting, human beings can pick up nuances that the robots still can't do, thank goodness. And maybe that's why they get mad. But taking an article like that, something that interests you, and when you have kids that are older, they can handle know? And what I know from my background is psycholinguistics, and I was a reading specialist. And what I know is that kids can handle language that is several years above what they can actually read themselves. So even if it's an article that your 13-year-old wouldn't necessarily read, you can read it to him or her. And you can talk about that, and you can talk about the issues. Because as a parent in a media culture, instead of being peripheral, I want you to be the eagle-eye parent. The eagle-eye parent that supports a meta level for the kids. And metacognition, from the Greek, meaning above thinking. So above thinking, how do they think about their own thinking about technology? That is key. That is key. How they're perceiving images, how they're thinking about it, what your thoughts are, how they're different from the kids, and by opening it up. So you can think about family time with screens and family time without screens, and that was a long example to give. And obviously, there are so many benefits health-wise to engaging in nature. We know the problem of kids not having enough time out in nature when they are tethered to screens. Let's take a look at the next slide, and basically it's for you to think about having your teen list what they need and what they want, because needs and wants are different, but a 14-year-old doesn't know that. They think they need it. And this is a great teaching moment to support, well, what do you really need, and what do we all need here, and what do we want? And how can we get what we want? And if you want it, are you willing to do such and such? But by distinguishing needs and wants, it also helps the child get in touch with the importance of your priorities. And that is the next one. You matter, and let's go to the next one, thank you. Your parenting identity. And I mentioned this already, I just want to punctuate it as the next really important piece of relevant information. So here you have, taking time to clarify and communicate what's important to you. You may know what's important to you. Have you communicated it to your son or daughter lately? A vehicle for doing that is a family meeting. If you're not having regular family meetings, I want to encourage you to do so. And in just a little bit, I'll talk about how you can do that. And even if your kids are going to college next spring or next summer, whenever, in the fall, even if they're graduating in the spring, even if they're going to leave home in a few months, and you haven't started family meetings, you still can start them. And it'll help. There's tons of research on the value of family meetings. Your values, your priorities, your choices reflect you and what you want most for your kids. And then the relationship between your self-identity and your child's self-identity is brought to the surface. Let's look at the next slide, please. These got a little, when I made the transition to her computer, these jumped around. But you can see that when the parent trusts the child will create and have more of a feeling of autonomy. We talked about autonomy. And communicating that trust. When the parent is encouraging the child will feel more competent. Your encouragement, your affirmation, your strength building intentionally. When you make a connection, the child learns how to relate to others. Your authority creates respect, even though they're going to run and slam the door, possibly, throw a tantrum, expect it. It's normal. It's normal. Expect it. They have to fight you because they are trying to be separate from you, and at the same time, as crazy as it sounds, they want you to do it. You cannot not do it, set the boundary, keep your authority with the teen, even if you're worried how they're going to react and you don't want to create a problem. They might get emotional, okay? They're going to get over it. They're going to get over it. The bottom line is you. Now, this doesn't mean you can't have meetings in which you hear your child really well and you listen. And that's this whole agreement. Having a co-constructive relationship. The older the teen, the more you want their involvement in setting the rules and the boundaries. But there's got to be some prerequisites first. And one of them is that you are the authority. And they will respect you for it, and they will respect themselves for it. You can't teach them to respect themselves without you having your authentic authority in place. They won't respect themselves. It's not only that they won't respect authority, it's that they won't respect themselves because they don't have anybody containing them. They don't have the container for all the chaos going on inside. They need a structure for all their uncertainty, for all their hormonal ups and downs. And you and we as parents create that safety, that container, while their brain and their hormones and their life is going topsy-turvy. And they don't know who they are, they're just struggling to figure it out. Our authority creates that structure for them. It's such a gift, even though they're going to get mad. They don't know how else to react. And I know, and those of you who have kids that are grown in college, they'll come back and thank you. And they always do. They always do. The identity that they're searching for, so you have a calmness, you have the calm authority, this is it, and they learn to trust themselves. You ask questions and they learn to discern. They learn to become a critical thinker with your questions. And sometimes instead of telling a teen what to do, asking a question, like I'm wondering, have you thought about? Or I'm thinking now this, and I just was curious what you were thinking. It suddenly occurred to me such and such. By asking a question, even the best one is from your own curiosity, that this is your curiosity. You really own it, and you really are curious. If this person were 30 years old, you would be asking them this question. And this is a technique that sometimes helps, pretending that your 15-year-old is 25. Just pretend. And talking to your 15-year-old as if he or she were 25. Just try it. Just try it. And see how they respond to you. It's like, what? She believes in me. And your 15-year-old opens. Our language sometimes with teens is that and this is so natural and so normal to have our worry and anxiety in our dialogue with them, especially about contentious issues. And when I was coaching a mom of a 13-year-old, and of course she was really worried about his internet addiction, and something popped out of me that was really helpful to her, and now it's been helpful to other clients, and it was like, I said, it occurs to me that your fear is in his space. And how can you keep your fear out of his space? Because as long as the teen is feeling our fear, I'm so afraid he's going to get addicted, he's just on it, I need your help, you need answers. Okay, does he feel this fear? If he feels it, then this is the way the teen brain works, it's crazy. Then he says to himself, oh, my mom's really afraid I'm going to get addicted. Well, I must not have the competence and ability to not be addicted, therefore I'm going to get addicted. Yes, illogical as that sounds, that is how the teen brain will think. The younger teen brain, before 15. Oh, my parents don't trust me. That means I must not be trustworthy. Then, I'm just going to go out and show them I'm not trustworthy because I don't believe in myself. They don't believe in me. Why should I believe in myself? They need the model of belief in themselves in order to mirror, basically, their belief, because they're not believing in themselves easily right now during this time. It's a tricky one with teens. And so keeping calm, keeping clear on your priority and who you are is always a helpful beginning, so that you don't get hooked into all of their chaos, that you step outside of it and create that container for them. You know, the first thing that a cell does when the child is conceived, the cell puts a boundary around itself and decides, oh, I'm going to go be a liver cell. Well, first the spine cell, the brain cell. I'm going to go be a heart cell. Interesting, every living system does this, from cells to universes. The first thing, they put a membrane or a boundary around themselves, and they say, I'm this. This is what I am. I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm this. So the identity is key to starting the trajectory of everything that you want for your child. Your identity is key. Did you ever think about where mission statements kind of came from? You know, all of a sudden, corporations have mission statements and vision statements. The vision of this corporation, the vision of this organization. When I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, nobody had any vision statements. Never existed. We just take this for granted. Oh, we got vision statements. This came out of systems thinking, living systems thinking. The vision, because every living system, if it's not mutated by people and DNA, is what it is. A lilac bush does not become a rose bush on its own. You plant an acorn, you know if you water it, you give it what it needs, it will grow to an oak tree. It's never going to be a willow tree. In the natural world, without our interference, everything has its clear identity. And so researchers and scholars start looking at that and saying, how can we apply that concept? Because the idea of a clear identity means then when the waves of change come along and other people want you to do what you don't want to do and you don't want to do it, how do you know what you're about? Clear identity. Vision statement. Mission statement. That now is translated into brand, and it's gotten out of control maybe, but there's some really good things about that. Because it states who you are, what you're about, what your values are. If you don't have a vision statement or some sort of statement about what you value as a family, that's always a great activity to do with your kids too. This is what we believe in our family. You know, this is who we are. And yeah, I had to have my 13-year-old come home from a sleepover because there was a video that I didn't agree with. He called me and he told me about it when he was there, which was really, I mean, that was just the hugest thing that he did that. And then he was in tears, of course, having to come home, but he came home. He survived it. I survived it. You know, he was mad for days, even weeks, maybe he didn't talk to me. But we all survived it. I had to do it. I had to walk my talk. It was really hard, but worth it. So when we help kids get a healthy self-identity, and that's what it should say, healthy self-identity in a media age, then we give them sound decision-making abilities, critical thinking, and growth towards a mature perspective. You know, they start thinking maturely because they're starting to learn who they are and who they're not. This is really a worthwhile exercise. Take a look at these next pictures here. There are pictures of a model, and on the right-hand side is how she is, a size 4, beautiful. And on the left is how she was photoshopped. Photoshopped into skeleton where her head is bigger than her hips, wider than her hips. she herself protested this and put this up on Facebook to show what inanity is going on in the fashion world. Now, when your 13-year-old daughter looks at this, or a 14-year-old boy, what do we want them to think? We want them to go, oh, how awful the left one is, right? That's the reaction we want. We don't want them to say, oh, I want to look like that on the left. The concept of self-identity, of a clear understanding of who they are, supports that type of discernment when they see these types of images and they don't get caught up in it. Kids are seeing, and we are seeing, 2,000 of these kinds of images every day. These ads bombard us, just walking around. You can't get away from them. So they're going in. Now, if we wanted to use this as a teachable moment, we could show this to our daughter or son and talk about it if they are thinking that the left side is better than the right. And talk about health and not skeleton looks. And I noticed in the New York Times, in the supplements for the fashion, the models are looking really skeleton-like and almost dead. I mean, they look like dead bodies. Did you notice that? Like all the... that is another teachable moment with a teen, to talk about these models and what they're looking like. Is this how a regular person looks? I mean, juxtapose this to a runner or a marathoner or somebody that has a healthy body. What does this look like? So the self-identity is amazingly useful. And the last thing on self-identity is this quote by Howard Gardner. He has a new book, and maybe you know his work on the 7 intelligences. So he co-authored this book on intimacy, identity, and imagination in an apt world that you may want to take a look at. I highly recommend it for parents of teens. And there's a public identity kids are learning from apps. With respect to identity formation, apps can short-circuit identity formation, pushing you into being someone else's avatar, or that of your parents or friends, or one formulated by some app producer. Or, by foregoing various options, they can allow you to approach identity formation more deliberately, holistically, and thoughtfully. And this is what the chapter on parenting identity is about in Parenting Well, that I wrote many years ago. But here he's saying, we've got to be more holistic, more thoughtful, more intentional about helping our kids form their identity. Yes? Okay, would you put the rest of it on? Mm-hmm. And then the rest, because then, thank you. Howard Gardner and Katie Davis, The App Generation, How Today's Youth Navigate Identity, Intimacy, and Imagination in a Digital World. And I can keep that up there or bring the slide back when we're done if you're interested in that. The other quote that I thought was interesting is, new media technologies can open up new opportunities for self-expression, but yoking one's identity too closely to certain characteristics of these technologies and lacking the time, opportunity, or inclination to explore life and lives offline may result in an impoverished sense of self. Of course, Sherry Turkle wrote about the second self many years ago. Sherry Turkle's at MIT. Her latest book is called Alone Together, Alone, or Alone Together, I can't remember. Alone Together, about social media, that we're alone, but yet we're with the crowd. Her seminal book was called The Second Self, on how computers are creating the persona, our persona. And of course, what kids don't realize is that they can be autonomous on the media, on social media, and they are not themselves, so they're taking on a different self-identity. And that self-identity then, obviously, is impacting who they think they are and who they think they can become, as much as the self-identity we want them to have. So it's really a good idea to talk about these things, especially if they're playing games where they have the you know, the avatar, or where they are really projecting themselves into the character as they do in video games. They become that character. And I don't like the word life offline. I mean, life online, life offline. I mean, why can't we just call it life and know what we're talking about? But we say life online now because they're experiencing life online and life offline. I don't like that. It's just life. Let's look at the third piece of relevant information. And just quickly, and you know this, that there is no such thing as multitasking. And it's doing things, one thing at a time very quickly. Even though, go ahead, you could do that. Even though as a single mom, I brush my teeth in the shower, I never thought it was multitasking. But part of what we want to help kids to do is to focus on one thing at a time, and the teen's brain needs to focus for sustained periods of time. And giving them activities that would support that, we'll talk about that in a minute. But there's a difference between being a random person, and maybe you experience this if you're at home and you start a project and you start cleaning, and then all of a sudden you get an idea and you write a thank you note, or you go do an email, then you come back to the cleaning, and you know, you're random in the things that you're attending to, and you don't complete. Some people are laughing. You don't complete it as fast as like a more linear person would just stay with that one task and complete the task and then move on. That's not multitasking, and that's not what I'm talking about, not worrying about it. If the kid's random and they're doing things like that, at least they're focused on it. And at any age, kids can attend to a task for long periods of time. I've seen 3-year-olds with a bucket, a pail, and sand, and that's all they had. And they were there for hours with that bucket, pail, and sand. So what we want to do is increase the amount of time kids are focusing on a project or a task where they have to select attention. There's a selective attention processing mechanism in the low brain that gets hijacked in a media culture, in playing fast-paced, violent video games, doing things that require a quick response, reactivity, and what we want to do in the next thing, and you have a handout on this, is slow things down a little bit. Let's look at the next slide, and here are some ways you can help kids focus on one thing and slow things down at the same time. You want to help ponder. A mindful thinking child will spend some time pondering and think through a complex process. Part of the research shows that the more kids spend on screens, the more they lack vigilance to stay with a mental problem that requires difficult thinking processes. They give up really easily. They lack the determination to stay with the problem. There are ways around this. As a teacher, I used to give my kids think time. All they had to do was put their heads down and think. I'd give them a question, and in high school, they'd put their heads down on their desk and think, and some of them, of course, weren't thinking about that, but they used to think it was fun. But I was very serious about think time, and I would give them their homework on Friday was always a thinking assignment. Of course, the first time you give this thinking assignment to kids, they don't, oh, Misty, this is silly, you know. Who thought about it? Nobody remembered to think about it. Okay. Every weekend, that's all they had to do for homework is think. And the question would be on the board, whatever it was. You know, why did Thoreau go to Walden Pond? Who knows what the question was. It's an English teacher. And they had to think about it. Well, pretty soon a few kids started taking it more seriously. Well, I sat down and I thought about this, and I jotted some ideas down. Oh, let's hear. Finally somebody thought about it. And now think about his responses next week. And so we built this organization of thinking, categories of ideas we wouldn't have had if we didn't have the thought process over time. What we're missing in a fast-paced media technology is this wonderful feeling of pondering and thinking through and taking time to meander within. It is so important. You can't build high-level thinking skills without it. It's so important. So we could do this. We could just say, hey, we're just going to think about this. We're thinking about going here. We're thinking about going to Miami for summer vacation. I don't want to talk about it right now. Let's just think about it for a week, and then we'll talk about it at our family meeting. I mean, you can do it just as incidental as that as parents. Just think about it. What would be fun? Or you could research it on the web and think about it. And then we'll talk about it. From things like that to just an incidental thing, you know, gosh, I read this in the news, and I want us to think all about what's going on in Fort Hood, that this has happened now for the second time. What do you think is going on there in Fort Hood? Let's think about it this week, and let's remember to come back to this when we go out to dinner. We'll talk a little bit about it. So you're being intentional about putting out something for them to think about. And you'll be surprised at how high the level of thought can be given that time. And even if they forget to think about it, sometimes the unconscious does some really interesting things there. This selective attention process we talked about, they know, that you're not paying attention to the peripheral, to the unimportant. They start learning what's important, what's meaningful to pay attention to. Adapt at weighing alternatives and choosing the best route to the envisioned outcome. Relies most often on own thought processes for decision making and develops metacognition and meta-awareness skills. And that is the metacognition and meta-awareness skills to me are the key to kids in a digital age so that they would have a discernment process within them. Daniel Siegel has written a new book, you probably saw it, it's on the New York Times bestsellers list, called Brainstorm, and it is about the adolescent brain. So he's a medical doctor and a foremost researcher on brain science. And this quote, these points come from his book called The Mindful Brain. The next point of relevant information for you is slowing down. Slowing down and slowing thinking down. And this example I just gave you of think time is a way to do that. So you do both with that, think time. Well, let's look at the brain. You know the three parts of the brain. We've got the brain stem hooking into the spinal column. And that is our place of freeze, flee, or fight, our reactivity in that brainstem. Then you've got the middle brain. It's sometimes called the limbic system, or the chemical factory of the brain. And that's where over 52 neurotransmitters, hormones are actually manufactured, go out to the rest of the brain. Then you have the big thing on top, right, from the bottom, the cerebral cortex, which covers it all, sometimes called the crown of the human race, right? Because this is what separates us supposedly from the animals in the sense that we can think. Now, the cortex grows slowly and steadily, refines itself from the bottom up throughout childhood. So the baby is working at the base with the amygdala, with the 3-year-old learning to control temper tantrums, to this prefrontal lobe here underneath the forehead, which doesn't mature until age 24 or 25. So teens may think they have all the gray matter, but they do not. Their brain is in a process of development. And early teens, between 11 and 14, what happens, and I highly recommend Daniel Siegel's book on this, but basically what happens is that the thinking function is slowing down a little bit because puberty is coming to the fore. And during puberty, there's all these hormonal changes going on naturally. The limbic system kicks in where the cerebral cortex takes a little vacation. So that's why at age 15 or 16, I could start talking to my sons again, reasonably. Because between 11 and 14, I couldn't. Those were the hardest times of my entire life, when my sons were 11 to 14. I honestly tell you that. Because you can't reason with them. You cannot. And I didn't know the brain science wasn't there the way it is now. It's really like you've got a 2 or 3-year-old, again, in a 11-year-old body. And so the boundary needs to be set very clearly and know that the fuss will be there. But did you ever notice that when kids start studying for their driver's license or things, they start getting their driver's license, or they start getting ready for the prom, or they start writing SAT tests, or they start writing essays for college, all of a sudden they are easily now more communicative. They are not within themselves so much. Things have calmed down with their hormones, and their brain, the cognitive function, is now kicking back in. And their prefrontal lobe, which is the seat of the highest level thinking, of discernment and having the ability to make wise decisions, is now growing again. So that 16, 17-year-old brain is a very different brain from ages 11 to 14. What video games will do, the more violent and the more fast-paced they are, the more they will hyperactivate the low brain area and cater into that reactive response. Part of our challenge in a media culture and all of these fast-paced games is to get the cerebral cortex in charge of the growing brain. If we start video games too early with young children, we can potentially mess up their low brain system, so that then the low brain is in charge and they are hyperactive, aggressive, bullying, and unable to control themselves. Self-regulation and self-direction are absolutely critical for behavior management. But where do they come from? Where does self-direction and self-regulation come from? It comes from the cerebral cortex being in charge. I heard Daniel Siegel talk once, and he said, you know, this whole point, if you look in the back of that prefrontal lobe, right where that prefrontal lobe is connecting to the limbic system. So you have the brain stem and you have the cerebral cortex here, and then there's a point, and in here is the limbic system. There's one place in here that connects all 3 parts of the brain. And that place in there that's connecting all 3 parts of the brain is the turn-off switch. It's the dampening switch to the potential aggressive behavior. And we know